Today, we're going to get right into it. We're talking about psionics, the supposed ability to manipulate reality, energy, or information through the power of the mind. Mind shielding or defense, mental protection from outside influence, and energy manipulation. But it seems like there's a layer that's been added to psionics as we understand it today that involves a technical component.
Deprivation to light, deprivation to sound, inducing a frequency, so that stimulates part of the brain. We know what frequencies stimulate part of the brain, especially those that are helpful for having external experiences with phenomena. Highly secret developmental programs were put together through the US government. The lower one was Haystack, which is about trying to bring down, as they say, bring down a UFO. It was the enticing of bringing these things to ground or near ground, and then basically pounce on them with weapons and technology that we have, or the US have, to try and gain the technology for themselves.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 4 of UAP and Beyond. I'm with my co-host, Steve Mera, all the way over across the pond in the UK. Oh, always a delight to
Thank you.
Chat to you, Steve Mera. Listen, guys, today we're going to get right into it. We're talking about psionics. This is something that I don't know that, I certainly don't know that Jake Barber, who was the one that kind of cracked open the door to the whole psionic discussion, has since talked about it, other than I'm going to correct myself, the Psionic Summit, actually. There's been 2 of them that Mr. Garrison, Jim Garrison from Ubiquity University has done brilliant work. But, there's a lot more room to have an even deeper discussion on psionics. And I'm going to call this the deeper side of psionics and how this really works. Because Steve Mera, you gave me some insight, dude, into some things that are going on behind the scenes and connections to other aspects of the phenomenon of psionics. Let's see if I can get this right.
Placement.
There you go. It's called transplacement.
Yes.
We're not going to bog you down with we're not going to bog you down with the terms, everyone, but we want to get into how all of these things are connected. And of course, this is about fundamentally a telepathic link, but it involves so much more.
So much more.
So much.
That's just a start of it. I mean, if you talk about telepathic links, I mean, we previously talked about the telepathy tapes. Mm-hmm. It's just, imagine drawing a triangle and just putting lines across, and that is the peak of it. You've got other layers. It consists of other things. And this is what we're finding is that, that's fascinating subject, telepathy, but it consists of more. And when you start to look, you start to realize, it goes into the physicality of our reality as well. It's not only like it's because everybody thinks about telepathy is a form of communication, it's non-physical. But there is physical aspects to this as well, mm-hmm. which the phenomena can certainly manipulate. And that's where it starts getting very, very interesting.
Very interesting.
And certainly when we're talking about psionics, everybody's talking about psionics at the moment, which, to be honest, has been going on for a long time. That's another thing. It's got other names. I mean, years back, it would have been ritualistic practices, first off. Mm-hmm. Then it would have been your seances and things like that, right. Communications. Then it would have been into the close encounter type stuff, where it's C5, Stephen Gray Initiative. Then developments into heist, because the only difference between C5 and heist is the fact that it's more control, because when you're dealing with C5 initiatives and people are coming, these are people that are just anybody. Where heist is sort of looks and goes, do you know what? You're an experiencer and you're an experiencer. Let's bring these people together. It's a bit more controlled and with better results.
Right.
And then, of course, the next step is, of course, your PC, your psionic circles.
And by the way,
yes.
Sorry about that. By the way, HICE stands for Human Initiated Contact Encounters.
Yes.
There's been a little bit of a tussle between what came first, CE5 or HICE, but they've got aspects of the same thing. I want to tell you how I've done a couple of shows on psionics. I hope y'all will look in the archives to find them. But psionics is defined, I'm going to give you the textbook definition, as the supposed ability to manipulate reality, energy, or information through the power of the mind. And it's often treated as if it were a measurable training system that you could call the science of the psyche. So it's said to involve telepathy, psychokinesis or telekinesis,
That's it. Physical stuff. Yeah.
clairvoyance, precognition, shielding or defense, which I found interesting, mental protection from outside influence, and energy manipulation. So, like projecting psi energy or what's called chi. So there's a
Yes.
lot of components to this, but here's the other thing, Steve, that I find interesting. When you think of psionics, I know what you're saying in terms of it's been called different things over the years, but it seems like there's a layer that's been added to psionics as we understand it today that involves a technical component that is added to the
Yeah. I
that's
understand.
important.
Yeah.
That's an
There
important
are
distinction.
five. There are five in total that represent psionics. You got your natural process, which is through just your normal process of communication. Then you've got your meditational communications. So you're doing it through a point of meditation. You've also got the spiritual aspect, because some people might refer to this as it's a spiritual thing I'm communicating with, or it's biblical, it's religious, has religious connotations. Then, of course, there's the chemical inducing, which I would not recommend. Where many thousands of years ago, people were doing that in different tribes and things around the world, eating certain plants like ayahuasca and many other things and stuff to have those type of induce certain experience that might enhance psionics. And now we have the technological era coming in, and this is what you're referring to. And there is the process. I know that process very, very well. Again, it's development of Ganzfeld. It's Ganzfeld plus what they call. So it's deprivation to light, deprivation to sound, inducing a frequency, so that stimulates part of the brain. We know what frequencies stimulate part of the brain, especially those that are helpful for having external experiences with phenomena. And this types of equipment utilized on location within individuals is a group effort. This is the point where they are up to at the moment, which they've been doing for the last, we're only hearing about it now, but I think it's about 15 years, something like that. Okay. Within that 15 years, two highly secret developmental programs were put together through the US government. The lower one was Haystack, which is about trying to bring down, as they say, bring down a UFO. They're not. We're realizing now they're not actually bringing down the UFO. It's an enticement. It's please come and land. It's that sort of thing. So
very controversial.
It's very controversial. And then I hate to say, but Interloper came along then, and Interloper was it was like, remember that old cartoon with the coyote and the roadrunner?
Yes.
It's a bit like that. You put the seed out and you're waiting behind the wall with a hammer. This is what Interloper was. It was the enticing of bringing these things to ground or near ground, and then basically pounce on them with weapons and technology that we have, or the US have, to try and gain the technology for themselves. And that was Interloper, and that involved a lot of military effort from various different departments and a huge amount of money. So Interloper is still very, very sensitive and can't be talked about much, but we are aware of it. And Haystack is the lower version of this.
Yeah, how interesting. Well, again, this is where it gets into the more nefarious aspects that, it's still questionable as to how much advanced NHI would allow programs like this to even be successful using the criteria that they're using. But this whole idea, this whole idea of the telepathy aspect, which, on a cursory level, when people first hear psionics described, believe that is the primary aspect that's involved is a telepathic, and there is a telepathic link, of course. But you've used this term transplacement, and that's what I want to get into a little bit more today. I want to put up an image for us that Steve was kind enough to send over for us to kind of talk about. I'm going to just put this up here for you and I to look at. Transplacement. Now, again, we don't want to get bogged down with terms and conditions, but you call this a psychological and physiological manipulation, a mechanism at play. Talk about that. Describe that.
Okay, so, well, many people over the years, we've heard these references of telepathy in the alien abduction cases or contact cases. And we have heard about telepathy in other realms, such as communications in parapsychological experiments, where there've been a receiver and a transmitter. They usually have to be close to each other, within 30 feet normally. And one's a transmitter, one's a receiver, and they're communicating with telepathy. We didn't realize until probably about the latter sort of 90s that there was a huge area of research that needed to be taken on board in regarding us hearing voices. Excuse me. Now, these voices can be, you might refer to them as spiritual, paranormal, ethereal, or NHI, non-human intelligence in some cases. But the method of their communication is standard. Now, what we realized is that through experiments, it all started with 7 experimenters sat there and took about a year to build up the experiment where we were able to go through the process of seance. It took about maybe 9 months to build a circle. Then you got to push through, and you end up having the poltergeist type stuff happening in that environment. You got to push through again to be able to communicate with things not of our realm or reality. That was the term, not non-human intelligence, not extraterrestrial, not of our realm or reality. And you communicate with things allegedly which are not human in origin. Now, they got to the point where direct voice phenomena was communicated. Now, because they don't seemingly, NHI, have vocal cords, it sounds electronic a bit. And we asked the question, well, does it sound like a male or female? Well, it can't, to be honest, can't really tell. It's a bit of both, and it's electronic, and it tends to come out of the corner. It's always above you for some reason, direct voice phenomena, DVB. But we got to the point where we would be able to ask questions and gain answers. Now, we don't know the legitimacy of those answers, but we were getting them. And we were asked if we could write down 10 questions and come back the following day. And would they answer them if we did put 10 questions down? And they said yes. We went away. We wrote these 10 questions down. And you can imagine for once when you sat there, Alexis, for the very first time thinking, what questions do I ask? Because I might get the answer. It's quite a surreal moment, to be honest with you.
Right.
So you can imagine, we wrote some questions down. Is there a heaven? Do we go to heaven? And many others. But we decided to pick the top 10, and we go back and we sit at the table and we ask, can we give these 10 questions? Would they answer them? And they came back, said yes. And before we gave the questions, all 10 answers came out. Boom,
before
boom,
you
boom,
gave
boom,
the questions. Wow.
Yes.
That's something pretty powerful.
So I thought, okay, how did they know that? Well, they must have known what the questions were. So were they there at the time of our discussions when we were putting this down, or are they obtaining it from us? So we started to have further communications and wanted to record them. So we started to record them, and I started to realize very quickly that sometimes we were hearing the answers, and not just me, other people hearing the same thing, but the recorder sat over there is not recording it. How can the recorder get other recorders? It's faulty. So we brought in Olympus. Now, it's a very well-known business that builds communications and electronics and all sorts of things. Very big company. So Olympus came in, and we used their equipment, 3 recording devices, identical. And it was so strange to hear it, but not be recorded, because the recordings on this equipment would have recorded it harmonic, everything harmonic, and yet we heard it. So how did we hear it if it's not harmonic? Then we realized what was actually going on is transplacement, the manipulation. Now, just beyond, because when we're hearing, like you're listening to this show now, for our viewers, it's sound waves which bouncing off your eardrums which create movement in the cochlear area of the inner ear, at the inside. This channel of hairs and liquid which vibrate. And they
You're getting
vibrate.
too scientific.
I'm sorry, but this is how we hear. It's incredible. This is how we hear. So what the brain does, it goes, oh, I recognize that movement, and transposes it into language. But it is just vibrations off the eardrum. That's all it is, like banging a drum. Now, if it's not harmonic, there's no eardrum movement. So what they're doing is transplacing it directly to the inner ear.
Yeah.
That's it. So we are pieces of equipment to the phenomena.
Wow. Yeah.
Not only the paranormal, but NHI as well. They can communicate to us internally. So we think we can't tell the difference if it's, did we hear it, or is it placed inside us and we hear it?
Mm-hmm.
And then when we started to realize this, then transplacement became so prominent in many, many other areas, and they were very, very demonstrative as to what they could do.
Many other applications. It reminds me of what is loosely referred to as voice of God technology. And this is what, where we get into a little bit of a slippery slope when it comes to perhaps individuals that are involved in certain acts. I'm not going to get too descriptive, that were perhaps given the instructions vis-a-vis what you're describing right now. So, yeah.
Well, they can do a number of things. They communicate in numerous different ways. The first way is audibly, right? So we might hear them, and they might be harmonic, and we can record them. People refer to them as EVPs and things like that. It was part of instrumental transcommunication, ITC days. It all started. Now, there's also not only that, but photographs. Now, what they do is that they will transplace images onto a film, a camera film. The camera film's not even in the camera. Mm-hmm. It's not even been loaded in. It's brand new, still in its box, left in a container which can't be touched or manipulated. After the experiment, we just take it and go and take it to the shop and get it exposed to find out there are images on there of people, of writings, communication. It's never even been loaded. It's never even been used, this film. They've transplaced it onto that. And it's surprising because when we've got cassette recorders, just as it was used in the Scole Experiment, which was an experiment that took place in the 1990s, in the UK, there was times when recordings were captured on cassette when it was impossible to record because there were no power to the unit, or the parts of the recording, the recorder was taken away, like the recording head and stuff, and yet they transplaced onto that. In fact, what they realized at the end of the day was, Alexis, is that all you needed was that cassette. You didn't even have to put it in a recorder. You could put the cassette on the side of the table and it could transplace onto it.
Let's look at that right now. You're going in deep, man. It's a lot of information taken. Let's watch this real quick, and I think this is kind of support. We've got several things we want to show. Let's take a look at this.
So communicating with spirit, and which was a very effective way, was by use of an ordinary, very cheap tape recorder, whose amplifiers were used by the spirit team to carry on a two-way conversation with us.
We inspected this machine and found it was completely normal. Earlier, its built-in microphone had been removed to eliminate the possibility of recording anything. When the machine, which contained a blank cassette, was activated, witnesses were astonished when they heard this voice asking them a question.
Scole Experimental Group.
Yes,
Scole Experimental Group. Experimenting with audio.
This is what you just described. I've watched this like 10 times at this point, you guys, and still I'm confounded. And yet this is exactly how you've described it. One of the things that kind of
physics.
It's beyond physics. But one of the things that it over and above just the sheer, I don't know what you would call it, astonishment of what we're seeing here, is that this was you were supposedly listening to a discarnate entity who not only was able to imprint his voice onto this blank tape, and in some cases a tape that's been just rendered non-functional, but it shows that in some cases, some of these discarnate entities are well aware of what's going on. He was well aware of the Scole Experiments.
Well, exactly. But this is not EVP. This is AVP. It's an actual voice phenomenon. It's actual voice communication because they're asking questions and gaining responses. This is a communication. This isn't just when you randomly, like an EVP, you record something and some random things been said, and you think, oh, I caught an EVP. No, This is communication. This is far different. Because it's happening as it happens, which is really interesting.
In real time. How would you relate this to psionics then? How would this...
Right. The same process of communication is done in the same matter. It's done in the same focus point. How communications might come through devices or come through to your inner ear. It's the same process through the mind. So it's just being delivered. That's the return, and you deliver. So what happens is when psionic circles, they get together, they do these experiments. They're trying to communicate. They're trying to see if an unidentified object will appear in the sky. That's what they're trying to do, basically. And then focus on this to try and communicate. They're not, they use these references about bringing it down. It's a form of communication. And they're asking it, they're not forcing it down. They're asking it, can you come lower? Can you come nearer? And that sort of thing. And there is a response to that. Sometimes they will receive communications. They'll hear voices in their heads. Sometimes they'll get communications from recorded devices through this process. So sometimes it's physical recordings made. Sometimes it's through a non-physical means of, we say telepathy, but it's also transplacement. The professional name is more transplacement than telepathy, because it's not brain to brain communication, because sometimes you're dealing with crafts which seemingly, here we go, are conscious, not just the individuals in them, but the craft is also tied. The craft is tied with the craft is part of them. That's the best way I can put it. It's conscious in a sense.
The craft itself is sentient. Absolutely.
Yes.
This would be a good time to play this one, guys. Hold on to your hat for this one, everyone. If you got a hat on, let me play this for you, or really show it to you. There's no voice here. And then we'll talk about this on the back end. Speaking of NHI, take a look at this. You can maybe have a comment or two about this. But
well, what you are seeing is legitimate video recording of NHI during advanced seance sessions. That's where they first appeared around the same circle, long before they're associated to the alien abduction phenomena.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to play it again.
The first thing you see is a light anomaly. This one, a rose light. It was floating in midair.
What is this? What are we looking at here, Steve?
This is it's NHI.
This is as well. This looks like a person, though. Oh.
Yes, there are various different ones. There were two, what we refer to as blues, but they're really kind of greys. But there's the other blue. Yeah.
And why are we just seeing the head?
Because it was floating around the room.
Were you present for this? Let me
no, I wish I was not present for that. Through that was in 1996. By 1998, it moved into the advanced areas Scole, and it went on to have UAP, or you should say UFOs, the size of dinner plates, manifest in the room. Mm-hmm. They flew around the room, firing beams of light down onto the table, and as it moved around the room, the beam of light never left that point on the table. Then some of them would split off and become balls of light. It's just looking like the real phenomena, but miniature. Right. And they would come along and they would go on the table, bang, bang, bang on the table, then go through the table, then come up through the table, and then go bang, bang, bang. So basically, they were demonstrating they are metaphysical. They can go through tables or they can bang on them. Just like they can pass through a wall if they want to, or other times not. So it's a metaphysical phenomena. It was just a miniature version manifested in the room. Right. Incredible. It's one of the greatest experiments that's ever taken place, including the manifestation of newspapers from 1934, which was real. It looked like it just come off the press. It was analyzed with 1934 ink, 1934 newspaper. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting was it aged 500 days per day. that paper. It browned that quickly. So from then till 1990, it was 1998 it happened, it manifested, but it came from 1936. So imagine keeping a newspaper from 1936 till 1998, it will start to go brown. Ultraviolet light makes it go brown in that, even not sunlight, but just normal ultraviolet light. It browned 500 days per day, literally, since it manifested. So it caught up. The time caught up with it.
Wow. Okay.
It's incredible.
It is really incredible. Really.
Well, this was at a time when the NHI phenomena wanted to clearly demonstrate their capabilities, and one of them, which is probably the most, which I'll finish on this bit, is the most profound, was there was a vase, small vase, and it was brought to the seance table because we'd been very successful in being moved. You'd see it move across the table slowly, and then the communications with NHI would say, move it back, and you put it back. Well, there was at one point that process, we wondered, why do we keep repeating it? What are they trying to tell us to do? And I think on third or fourth occasion, they reached out to pick it up, and they couldn't pick it up. It was there. It would cast shadow. You could shine a light off it, but you couldn't pick it up. It was not physical until they made it physical, and that was their doing. They were demonstrating that they can even pick something out of our environment and make it metaphysical. That was mind-blowing.
I am always, or I should say, never cease to be amazed in trying to understand both the motivation and the very presence of NHI across the spectrum. So we know there are many, many species. It's suspected, let's just say. Where their enthusiasm in doing these sorts of things to prove to us or to show us that these things are possible. I want to take that. We're going to go to the after show on this one too. We have a few more minutes here, but I want to talk about that and maybe get into the NHI psychology, if you will, as to where all of these demonstrations are the means to an end. But I'm not going to have you get into that right now. We're going to go take that next door. In the meantime, there's a couple more things I want you all to watch. And Steve, you can talk about this. Look, this is really, guys, wait till you see this. Let me just shut up and let me show it to you. Crazy. Look at this.
Yes. Hello, Anna. Thank you, Anna.
After this, scientist Harry Oldfield, a colleague of the Scole Group, attempts further communication.
We would like to ask the question of the appearance of your space. Can you tell something about Scole? Thank you. Will the work progress? Thank you. This is what I needed to know.
My gosh. My gosh.
Let me just sort of run down on this. This is in Italy. This is a gentleman named Bacci, Bacci, and he was an instrumental transcommunicator. In other words, he was communicating through a very old tube radio to communicate with spirit. And of course, he became very popular. People would go and visit him and be able to sit and communicate with their past relatives that passed away. And they would come through the radio and they'd sound like them and they'd answer questions. Now, that's when the scientists got on board, they thought we've had enough of this and went to try and prove him wrong. The first thing they did, they had to build a very specialized Faraday cage to put this radio in there. And they did. And it still burst to life with communications. So Faraday cage is supposed to stop all signals coming and going through, didn't achieve what it meant to achieve. So they went one further and started, just like I was talking about the cassette player, taking out the recording head, they went into the radio and took out the old tubes, the three of them. So rendering the radio not being able to work. Made no difference. It still sprung to life in communications. They are beyond our physics. If they want to communicate through placing images onto a film that's not in a camera, placing information, audible information onto a cassette recorder where there's no recording head, sometimes no power provided to the recorder, they can do so. And the same thing, like radios, and even to us, they had demonstrated that, how advanced they are, that we are pieces of equipment as well that can be easily manipulated by this phenomena.
Absolutely.
How many people have said over the years, "Did you hear that? I just heard my name called." Well, we can't rule that out now. Maybe you did, because we are instruments. We are aerials to the phenomenon where we can be utilized by them. Now, when it comes to psionic circles, there are people who have had those type of similar experiences during what is referred to as the flower. Now, I'll explain. The flower is a process of where 6 or upwards lie on the ground with their heads more or less touching each other.
Right.
Right. To look from above, it looks like a flower. Yeah. But they believe that because the group process of communication is seemingly better when you're in close vicinity to other people and the heads of the consciousness, because these brain waves being shared like a conduit for everybody. And there has been some success with that. But then again, communications. Now, what happened was only one of them may have received it, but it went right round, and they all heard it. All heard it in the heads, So maybe it just transitions. One of them got it, and it just went right around all of them, and they all heard the same communication, which is really interesting. So people in the governmental psionic circles are made up of people which really not many of them are experiencers. I think they're getting there now, though. I think they're realizing we don't want to just bring in a load of soldiers and ask them to do this, or a load of scientists and just do this.
They have to be more vested in it in terms of, the lifelong. Well, one of the things I'll say is, going back to the show that we did on the gentleman, I believe Jason Sands, was it? We were kind of commentating about his appearance on Joe Rogan, and he touched on this idea of, oh gosh, I'm going to lose my train of thought. What you were just saying, this idea of
the group consciousness,
individuals in the military, including himself, being experiencers. In fact, the gentleman that was with him on the Joe Rogan show both talked about childhood encounters long before, obviously, they were in the military. So, I don't know that they're plucking these psionic individuals. These assets are not out of context with their background as children, as lifelong experiencers.
They are picking initiated individuals.
Yes. Indeed.
Like myself, many others, are initiated individuals. I mean, it just happens. It's just part of life now for me, anyway. Because I had initiated experience when I was 7, and then that's where I am now because of that experience. I assume they know that because, like I say, they are aware of future events, and maybe they know when they have initiated experience, like in 27, 28, 30 years' time, oh, you're going to be doing this, and that's what we want you to do. Get that word out. Do this. So maybe that initiated experiment, puts you on the tracks.
Experience. Yeah, I can say the same thing for me, Steve, without going into a lot of detail. I've spoken about it before. In 2005, I had a very deep, what I'll call peak experience, in which for the sum total of 90 plus days, I was getting, we call them euphemistically downloads, but it was a voice in my head that was sharing insights with me, and not the least of which was showing me what I would be doing some 20 years later. Here I am.
There we go.
I dare say this is part and parcel of what happened here, initiated experience.
They want to pick people like us. And in fact, I am part of a psionic circle, in our own way, with individuals which are initiated experiences. And it's highly successful, but it's a matter of fine-tuning. And what we realized early on when communicating with NHI, they like to communicate with people who are experiencers, observers. Well, they don't tend to like scientists, funny enough. Not having to go at scientists here. I want them to. I want to be able to have all scientists sat around during our experiments, but it will be flat.
Until and unless the experimenter,
they've got to switch on up here.
Not until the experimenter becomes the experiment.
That's right. They're like people who have had that experience, because what they don't tend to like too much is people which are sort of, well, I don't believe this, or cynical, you know. And it's strange because you don't get good results. And I've always argued the point, well, maybe it's a bit like when people report religious apparitions, you know, the Mary, many other things. But they won't have it if they don't have a belief in religion.
Yeah.
We don't believe in religion. You're not going to have an apparition of the Virgin Mary, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's part. Yeah, I think in most cases, I think it helps when you are an experiencer and you come to the table, because we've done tests and we've said, well, okay, the best results are the ones which were experiencers, people who have had experiences,
right.
And when they work together, that's what the phenomenon catches their attention, you know.
Absolutely. So I will say, just for the record, though, just to push back just a tad, you do have those occasional, more than occasional, individuals who are ardent skeptics that will have an in-your-face incident that will change their paradigm entirely.
Well,
I think there's
believe that.
probably a different why to all of that, but those need to exist as well. So,
oh, yeah, they do exist. I've come across a few of them. But what I've discovered was it changed the path they were on.
Mm.
And it led them to a completely different path for a reason. So there's meaning behind it. These aren't just random events.
No, not at all. And many times they'll become ambassadors for the very phenomena that they experienced that they were so ardently against. So listen, we're out of time, man. We're out of time. We're going next door because you know what? You guys, tell me what you think. I want to dig in to this idea of why NHI, as we're calling them these days, so forgive the term, hell-bent on showing us what's possible. What's that all about? Let's go next door and talk about that. And by the way, while you're here, before you leave here, can you please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come along for the ride? We're taking this as far as we can at this very exciting time. So, as always, Steve Mera, my friend, my co-host, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. Hope to see you next door. Great conversation. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye now.